Chapter 1001. Xiao Yuan. A voice as clear as spring water rang out. The beautiful black-clothed woman looked at Yu Qianzhou in confusion. She didn't seem to know this person, but why? The boy in Yu Qianzhou's arms immediately waved his hand happily and shouted, "Big sister, come here quickly." Damn it. Why did you call your sister here? Yu Qianzhou smiled guiltily and said, "Xiao Yuan, is this your sister?" The boy nodded and said, "She's my third sister." Is she beautiful? Beautiful. Hee. So beautiful. Yu Qianzhou couldn't stop praising. But Sang Yinxin secretly transmitted his voice to him. This woman is a late-stage underworld supreme. I'm afraid she's not simple. Be careful. The water spouting from the Netherworld River slowly descended and disappeared behind the surface of the water. The graceful and beautiful woman walked over on the water with light steps. Although her steps were slow, they had the essence of shrinking the ground into inches. Her movements seemed to be neither too fast nor too slow as she leisurely walked forward. Each step was like a dream. She had already advanced several dozen meters and arrived in front of Yu Qianzhou in just a few steps. The lady's hair was tied up high and her hair reached her waist. Although her appearance was not bad, it was still inferior to Lu Yanqing and Ji Wu. However, her calm temperament was not something ordinary people could see. She was quiet and serene, giving people an indescribable feeling. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou and Sang Yinxin suddenly looked down at their feet. The clam had silently dived into the water. The two had no choice but to stand on the water surface. Yu Qianzhou wanted to question Ji Yu, but he wanted to maintain his demeanor. He cursed in his heart, "Try running if you have the guts." In fact, Ji Yu didn't want to run either. He turned into his human form and emerged from the water surface. He bowed to the lady walking on the water's surface and said, "Greetings, third princess." Ji Yu? The lady frowned slightly. The two obviously knew each other. She just didn't expect Ji Yu to turn into his human form. Third princess? Such a big background? Yu Qianzhou and Sang Yinxian looked at each other. The woman's gaze then fell on the two of them. When she realized that she couldn't see through their cultivation, she was slightly startled and said, "You two are?" Without waiting for the two to reply, the water in front of them spewed out several water columns in succession. Several good-looking men and women appeared at the top of the water columns. The way they appeared was much more intense than the third princess's appearance. The men and women all had an extraordinary aura. Although the style of their clothes was different, they were all black. Judging from their appearance and behavior, it was obvious that they were of noble birth. They first stared at the mountain gate for a while, then looked around and saw that the third princess was actually standing together with two people from the immortal world. They were all stunned, especially when they saw that Xiao Yuan was being carried by one of them, and they were even more surprised. When they realized that they couldn't see through the cultivation of the two visitors from the immortal world, they all lowered the water heads and flashed over. Shen Yu's face was filled with fear as he bowed repeatedly, "Greetings to the Crown Prince, Second Crown Prince, Third Crown Prince, Princess, Second Princess." He bowed to all of the 5 men and women that came after him. These people have different levels of cultivation, but they are all at the level of a nether lord. I wonder which royal family they are from in the River Styx's water tribe. How impressive. Before Sang Yinxian could finish transmitting his voice to Yu Qianzhou, the boy in Yu Qianzhou's arms suddenly shouted at Ji Yu in a childish voice, "I am the 4th Crown Prince of the Li Palace. Why don't you greet me?" Everyone fell silent when they heard this. The people of the Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor and Sang Yinxian all looked at Yu Qianzhou with strange gazes. Little did they know that every hair on Yu Qianzhou's face froze. He was speechless. He didn't expect that the fish he had casually caught with his fishing rod would be the 4th Crown Prince of the Li Palace. Now, he was even being carried by his father. What a coincidence. Heavens! What kind of joke is this? Xiao Yuan, don't be rude. When father and mother are here, we will punish you for leaving the palace without permission. The third princess who came first shouted. Her words undoubtedly confirmed the child's identity. Xiao Yuan, who was in Yu Qianzhou's arms, pouted, while Yu Qianzhou looked at the child in his arms with a twitching expression. He wanted to cry but no tears came. 7 Netherlord experts came, and 2 old fellows were coming. You unlucky child, why did you sneak out without permission? If you didn't sneak out, would I have been able to catch you with my fishing rod? Now, he wanted to grab this child and slap him. A disobedient child was too annoying. The most painful thing was that his words just now were to fool this child. How would he know how to jump the dragon gate? If he directly jumped over, with this child's tribulation passing stage cultivation, there would be no problem at all. Not to mention the group of Netherlord experts in front of him. How could a mere height of 100 meters stop them? Clearly, there was something else that he didn't know. If he was exposed and he escaped first, who knew if these people would be able to kill Tsangyin Xian? Yu Qianzhou thought. Zhou Yu's speechless gaze retracted from Yu Qianzhou's face. He bowed to Xiao Yuan and said, "Greetings, 4th Crown Prince." Xiao Yun immediately looked at the 3rd princess who stopped him and chuckled. The boss, who was addressed as Crown Prince by Zhou Yu, looked at Tsangyin Xian and Yu Qianzhou coldly. He cupped his fists and said, "I am Li Zhong, the Crown Prince of the Li Palace of the Styx River. May I know how to address the 2 experts from the immortal world? I presume you are not nameless people from the immortal world." Before he could reply, there was another movement in the Styx River. The loud noise attracted everyone's attention. Suddenly, a white wave surged into the sky from afar. After the wave passed, thousands of black-armored mighty soldiers holding long spears or swords at their waists rose from the water. In the middle, there was a sturdy and ugly single-horned water rhinoceros with a splendid carriage on it. 2 dignified and noble-dressed people who looked like a couple sat on it. The 2 armored soldiers who were in the front row waved their long whips in a circle and suddenly shook them. A "pa" sound rang through the night sky. A group of people immediately rode the waves and came over. It was not a small show. Yu Qianzhou and the others were not fools. They could guess who had come. It was probably the father and mother of the princes and princesses in front of them. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Tsangyin Xian. He was very hesitant. Should he leave? But if he ran now, it would be difficult for him to survive in the underworld in the future. The people of the hidden dragon manor in the air had already quickly moved far away. They stood in the air and watched. It was fine if they could not see clearly. Not causing trouble was the most important thing. After the group of water race soldiers arrived in front of them, a wave surged in the middle and separated to the 2 sides, creating an empty passage. The entire passage was filled with snow-white waves. The sturdy single-horned water rhinoceros slowly stepped on the waves and stopped about 10 meters away from the group. The princes and princesses of the Li Palace all knelt down on one knee. Even Xiao Yuan, who was in Yu Qianzhou's arms, broke free and bowed in unison. "We pay our respects to father and mother." Shen Yu also knelt down and bowed. "We pay our respects to your majesty and empress." The dignified, round-faced man with a long beard waved his hand and said, "All of you may rise." Yu Qianzhou and Tsangyin Xian only cupped their hands and bowed. After all, the 2 of them were subordinates of the immortal world's Grand Commander Jin. In the underworld, they would at most pay their respects to the Emperor of the underworld. It was not good for others to be overly courteous. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, had a stomach full of doubts. What was going on with the Emperor of the underworld? He was too much of an Amitabha. He did not care about the appearance of an emperor. At this moment, the noble lady on the carriage waved her hand and said, "Xiao Yuan." Xiao Yuan immediately flashed behind Yu Qianzhou, not daring to show his face. Clearly, he was afraid of being punished for leaving the palace without permission. In this way, Yu Qianzhou did not know whether to laugh or cry. The gazes of the emperor and empress of the Li Palace were all focused on him. It was hard for him not to attract attention. Tsangyin Xian also secretly transmitted his voice. "These 2 have reached the intermediate stage of the Emperor of the Underworld. Do not underestimate them." The 2 people on the carriage immediately sized up Yu Qianzhou and Tsangyin Xian. Sungin Xian's intermediate stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World had already shocked them. It should be known that in the Immortal World, immortal emperors would not casually come to the underworld. However, when they discovered that they could not see through Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, they were shocked. Logically speaking, this person's cultivation had clearly reached the advanced stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World. Otherwise, they would have been able to see through his cultivation. Could it be that in the Immortal World, besides Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, there was someone else who had reached the advanced stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World? Why had they never heard of him? It should be known that it was very difficult for the people of the Immortal World to find out about the Underworld River's water race, but it was not difficult for the Underworld River's water race to find out about the Immortal World. After all, it was easy for one side to send their subordinates to the shore in human form, but it was difficult for the people on the shore to disguise as the water race to the Underworld River. The two looked at each other and stood up. Although the Underworld River's water race did not have much contact with the Immortal World, they did not dare to be careless. At the very least, they had to be courteous. This immediately shocked the crown princes and princesses. They all turned to look at the two. They did not dare to be disrespectful to people who could be treated like this by their imperial father and imperial mother. Shen Yu looked at the two of them with trepidation and thought to himself, where did these two come from? The two cupped their hands. The dignified man smiled. I am the lord of the Li Palace of the Underworld River, Li Guang. I did not know that there were experts from the immortal world here. I wonder how I should address you two experts. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Sungin Xian and thought, even if I told them about my small sect, they probably would not know. Sungin Xian maintained the demeanor of a large sect. He raised his hand to return the greeting and said loudly, I am Sungin Xian from the Immortal World's Passionless Palace. Greetings, Your Majesty, Empress. So you are the chief consecrator of the number one sect in the Immortal World, Passionless Palace, Sungin Xian. No wonder you have such cultivation. It is an honor to meet you. Li Guang nodded and smiled. From this, it could be seen that he was rather well informed about the news in the Immortal World. However, he was suddenly stunned, and his gaze swept back and forth between Sungin Xian and Yu Qianzhou. He seemed to have thought of something, and he looked at Yu Qianzhou and asked doubtfully, could it be that you're the sect master of the Immortal World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianzhou? Chapter 1002. When he said this, the most shocked person was Yu Qianzhou. His mouth was wide open. Oh my God! When did I have such a great reputation that even the water race hiding in the river Styx know my name? Grey Cloud Xian's face darkened on the spot. From the other party's reaction just now, it was very likely that the reason why the other party knew Yu Qianzhou's name was because he had heard of Grey Cloud Xian's name. This meant that the matter of him following the Celestial Emperor's decree to protect Yu Qianzhou had already spread throughout the netherworld. Father is wise. He is indeed Yu Qianzhou, big brother Yu as in leaping over the dragon gate. Xiao Yuan didn't miss the opportunity to poke his head out from behind Yu Qianzhou and flatter him. Yu Qianzhou tilted his head and glanced at him, speechless. If I had known that you would have a father, I wouldn't have been your big brother Yu. But he still cupped his hands and smiled at Li Guang. Yu Qianzhou of the Immortal Realm's World Chamber of Commerce greets Your Majesty and Empress. Actually, after a moment of thought, he also realized that even if the Emperor had heard of him, it was impossible for him to recognize him. To be able to recognize him as Yu Qianzhou at a glance, it was most likely because of ashy cloud letters. The group of crown princes and princesses looked strangely at Yu Qianzhou, then at their father and mother. They had also heard of the World Chamber of Commerce's sect master Yu Qianzhou who had caused trouble in the Immortal Realm, but they didn't know how their father could recognize Yu Qianzhou at a glance. What they didn't know was that Li Guang and his wife had received the news about Yu Qianzhou and Ashing Yun Xian just before they set off. This news hadn't had time to spread in the Li Palace yet. Li Guang and his wife looked at each other, smiled faintly, then slowly sat back down. There had long been a rumor in the immortal world that Yu Qianzhou was able to conceal his cultivation level because he had mistakenly consumed some kind of immortal pill. In reality, his cultivation level was nothing special. In this way, the couple's suspicion that Yu Qianzhou was a late-stage immortal emperor expert was resolved. With Tsangyan Xian's mid-stage Immortal Emperor cultivation base, it was not worthy for the couple to stand and reply. In the distant sky, Ding Xiang and the others in the hidden dragon villa could only vaguely see the two parties interacting. As for what they were saying, they could not hear it clearly. At this moment, the fireflies in the empty belly of the mountain gate gradually scattered under the sound of the fish jumping in the water. The gazes of all the aquatic creatures turned in that direction, and the atmosphere instantly changed. Grey Cloud Xian's face tensed up as he looked over. Yu Qianqiu looked around in confusion, wondering what was going on. As the last nether river black carp leaped up, the last wandering firefly was devoured, and the last ray of light in the belly of the mountain was extinguished. In an instant, not a single ray of light could be seen on the surface of the river, and only the sound of the surging water could be heard. Rumble. There was a deafening rumble, and more than a dozen bolts of purple lightning flashed in the sky, illuminating the world with a purple haze. The strangest thing was that the bolts of purple lightning did not disappear after they appeared. Instead, they kept flashing and changing into arcs. The bolts of purple lightning formed a circle, spiraling continuously in the dark sky. Moreover, it spun faster and faster, until it was like a rotating purple light. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He felt that this spiraling purple light was like a teleportation gate from the immortal world to the netherworld. Could it be that something was coming to the netherworld from another space, on the towering Minghuang mountain surrounded by the 5 peaks? Inside the simple yet magnificent, sacred yet mysterious Minghuang royal harem, a small building stood in the middle of a secluded forest. The attic on the second floor had an open window, and the only light inside came from the fireflies crawling on the roof. Looking out from the attic, one couldn't see the sun, moon, or stars, but there were many fireflies in the secluded forest, like stars in the night sky. Everything seemed so quiet and tranquil. The night wind blew, and the silver-armored 1,000 soldiers' long hair fluttered. He was wearing a silver armor, and his face was full of stubble. He was silently looking at the slowly crawling stars in the secluded forest, and no one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, the sound of a paper scroll being pulled came from the attic, and then a gentle voice sounded, "1,000 soldier, have you recovered from your injury?" The white-robed scholar didn't even raise his head. After pulling the paper scroll, he added ink to the brush in his hand. He gently put one hand behind his back, and the other hand held the brush and added ink to the paper scroll. The silver-armored 1,000 soldier slowly turned around and walked to the side of the scholar. Seeing that the ink on the inkstone was about to run out, he picked up the wooden spoon on the table, and gently scooped up a small spoonful of water and poured it on the inkstone. Then he put the wooden spoon back into the basin, and picked up the ink on the inkstone. With a slight rustling sound, he helped the scholar grind the ink on the inkstone. While grinding, he said, "My injury is healed, but the shock in my heart is still not gone. Yes. I am also very surprised. I didn't expect such an expert to appear in the human world. It is really unimaginable. This person is indeed not simple." As the scholar said this, the tip of the brush in his hand suddenly started to delicately sculpt. The thin face of an old man in a green robe appeared vividly under the tip of the brush, and the drawing was very realistic. It was by Changchun, whom Yu Qianqiu had been searching for so long without any news of him. The content of the painting was majestic, and the order of the content was by Changchun defeating the silver-armored 1,000 soldier. Then, it was the fierce battle with the 4 netherworld generals. The content of the painting was the scene of the scholar fighting with Bai Changchun. "I didn't expect him to be able to escape from your hands." The silver-armored 1,000 soldier paused and looked at the painting. He carefully ground the ink and said, "To be able to have you paint for him, he died with honor." Died? The brush in the scholar's hand stopped, and then he shook his head and continued to paint. "Perhaps. Do you suspect that he didn't die? Even if he didn't die at that time, can he still come out alive after escaping into that place?" The silver-armored 1,000 soldier put down the ink in his hand and said with a frown, "He wasn't a match for you at all. You chased him all the way and you still let him escape. What exactly happened?" The scholar laughed softly and added ink to the brush in his hand. Perhaps he had thought of something, and the tip of the brush landed on the painting. Although Bai Changchun's green robe was already torn, his expression became more and more fierce. That impassioned aura of fighting against the heavens and earth leaped out, causing people's hearts to tremble. The silver-armored thousand soldier let out a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but think of the scene where he fought with this person. At that time, I hit him 1,300 times consecutively. Given his cultivation, it was already a miracle among miracles that he didn't die from such serious injuries. The scholar revealed a bitter smile that he hadn't shown for many years. He shook his head and said, "This person's willpower is so strong that it's terrifying. As long as he's still breathing, he definitely won't admit defeat." When he realized that the difference in strength between us was too great, I also cherished his talent. I once told him that as long as he admitted defeat and submitted to me, I could spare his life and give him everything that I could. The silver-armored thousand soldier laughed and said, "Obviously, he rejected me. Otherwise, why would he be forced to escape into that place?" The scholar suddenly straightened his back and looked at the distant night sky. He sighed and said, "That's right, he rejected me." The words of rejection still resounded in my ears. He said, "If you want me to submit to you, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall under your feet. If you want me to submit to you, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall under your feet." The silver-armored thousand soldier silently repeated a few times. His emotions were stirred up as he said, "What a character. Right now, I really want to go to that world and see what's going on there. How could such a character appear in that world?" The scholar waved his hand and said, "Don't even think about it. Jean Tai and I have a premonition that there's something waiting for us there. Once those people who provoked the heavens' punishment return there, they'll definitely suffer retribution. You're one of them." The silver-armored thousand soldier was silent for a while and said, "With his cultivation and speed, there's no way he could escape from your pursuit. You should have had countless opportunities to kill him. Could it be because you cherished his talent and couldn't bear to kill him, so you forced him into that place and let him fend for himself? You've overestimated me and underestimated him. Since I can't subdue him, I won't let this scourge live." The scholar shook his head and dipped the brush in his hand in ink again. He began to paint the scene of him chasing after Bai Changchun. As he painted, he said, "Although this person's cultivation wasn't high, he did have some ability. I reckon that at that time, all the blood in his body had already flowed out, but he stubbornly held on and would rather die than surrender. He wouldn't give up until the end. While he was escaping, he released a portion of the celestial essence in his body. After the golden arcs formed by the celestial essence fused with the heaven and earth, a strong gale suddenly rose between heaven and earth. The gale was like a strong wind, pushing him to escape, but at the same time, it blocked my pursuit. In such a situation where he couldn't stop me, countless shocking thunderbolts appeared between heaven and earth. I chased him all the way, and the countless thunderbolts bombarded me all the way. That's not all. In the end, all kinds of extreme phenomena such as snow, rain, wind, frost, and thunderbolts appeared one after another to help him escape. I couldn't help but suspect that it was the heavens' punishment. Even thinking about it now makes my scalp tingle. How could this be? This was the first time the silver-armored thousand soldier had heard of such a strange thing. He was stunned and said, "Could it be that this person's cultivation method can borrow the power of heaven and earth?" "I'm afraid so." The scholar smiled bitterly and said, "I can feel that the power of heaven and earth moved according to his stubborn will. It followed him all the way, but it made things difficult for me. If not for this, how could he have escaped from me? However, the price he paid was also huge. The moment he barged into that place, I could feel that his cultivation was almost exhausted. His blood was drained, his cultivation was exhausted, and he was only left with one breath. After barging into that place, no matter how powerful he was, I'm afraid it would be difficult for him to survive. But when I said that he would die a glorious death, why did you say maybe?" The silver-armored thousand soldier tilted his head and stared at him. "Even though he was injured to this extent, you still don't dare to believe that he will die?" "Previously, I thought that he would definitely die, but later, after the Holy Maiden returned from the human world, I accidentally thought of asking the holy maiden to perform a divination for that person, to see if he was dead or alive. Chapter 1003. Saintess? Silver Armor Soldier was surprised. Could it be that the Saintess has deduced that the person is not dead? No. The scholar's expression showed a hint of helplessness as he focused on the tip of the brush. The Saintess refused to deduce this person, so I can't force her. Don't you think this is strange? If that person is dead, why would she refuse to deduce? The realm that the Saintess returned to is the realm where that person is. Maybe the Saintess already has an idea about that person. The pavilion fell into silence. Silver Armor Soldier couldn't say much about the Saintess, but his expression became serious as he felt that something was strange. The scholar seemed to have entered the state of painting. He lifted the brush and dipped it into the ink. His brush was like moving clouds and flowing water. The content of the painting was progressing more and more smoothly. However, just as the brush was about to move, the scholar suddenly froze. The tip of the brush stopped for a long time. The Silver Armor army of 1,000 soldiers had been staring at the tip of the brush, deep in thought. When the tip of the brush paused, he immediately came back to his senses. He looked at the scholar, only to see the scholar lifting the brush hesitantly. His brows were slightly furrowed, as though he had noticed something. Silver Armor Soldier couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" The brush was picked up by the slender and fair fingers and placed upside down on the brush rack. The elegant and noble scholar in white slowly raised his head. His deep eyes, which seemed to be able to see through everything, looked out of the window, through the forest, and into the distant night sky. His gaze looked gentle and had a cultured and refined aura. However, upon closer inspection, there was an unconcealable majesty and indifference. It was shocking. The scholar's slightly closed lips slowly opened and said indifferently, "It's the Dragon Transformation Sect." Dragon Transformation Sect? Silver Armor Soldier was startled. He didn't notice anything strange and looked out the window. Are we going to summon the Nether River Black Carps to leap through the Dragon Gate again? It should be. I haven't seen it for a long time. I wonder if any Nether River Black Carp will obtain the great opportunity to transform into a dragon. The scholar turned to Silver Armor Soldier and smiled. This is a rare opportunity. We can't miss it. Shall we go take a look? There was no need to say anything. The two of them had known each other for many years and could understand each other with just a look. The two of them turned into a streak of white light and silently passed through the window. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the endless night sky one after the other. Several fireflies that were climbing upside down on the roof of the attic to illuminate the place immediately fell down, flapped their wings, and flew out of the window. Through the window, the attic immediately became pitch black. In the sky above the Dragon Transformation Sect, the 10 over purple lightning were still spinning like a top, giving people a dazzling and blurry feeling. However, it caused the people below to willingly watch without blinking. Hiding behind Yu Qianqiu, little Yuan, who was grabbing his robe with his small hands, also stuck out his head and stared at the sky without blinking. However, Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable all over. The two little hands were tugging at his clothes from behind. It felt like there were two weights hanging on his clothes. The collar of his clothes was being strangled by the little fellow behind him. It was abnormally awkward. Damn it. Why are you so nervous? Yu Qianqiu could feel little Yuan's grip getting tighter and tighter. His neck was also getting tighter and tighter. He was speechless and wanted to pull the little fellow to the front. However, the others' awesome parents, brothers, and sisters were all present. He had no choice but to restrain himself. He twisted his strangely uncomfortable neck, and when he swept his gaze across his surroundings, he was suddenly stunned. In the distant water region with the Dragon Transformation Sect as the center, a large group of messy people had silently appeared without a sound. The vision of the underworld was not very good. With his cultivation, if he did not pay attention, he would have missed them. Looking around, he could vaguely see that the people around him were all standing on the waves, and all of them were in an imposing manner. Some were standing with their arms crossed valiantly, while others had their hands behind their backs proudly. There was a distance between them, and very few of them were standing close to each other. It seemed like they were not the same group of people. From the different clothes they were wearing, it was clear that they were not people of the Li Palace. Old song, don't just look up. Look at the people around you. Who are they? When Song Yunshin heard Yu Qianzhou's message, he subconsciously looked around. He would not have known if he did not look, but when he did, he was shocked. His eyes flickered for a long time before he replied, those that I can see clearly have a cultivation of at least the early stage of the Underworld Emperor. I can see those that are too far away, but I cannot see their cultivation. However, their cultivation should not be low. As for who they are, I have not seen any of them. They should all be experts of the underworld. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was slightly shocked. Looking at the indistinct figures in the distance, there were at least 800 people. Could they all be experts of the Underworld Emperor level? He asked Shinyu in disbelief, Shinyu, look around and see who those people are. Shinyu turned his head and glanced at him. When he saw the strange sight of the fourth prince of the Li Palace grabbing his clothes and strangling him, he couldn't help but find it funny. But when he looked around, his smile instantly vanished. His eyes scanned the area and he gasped in shock. They're all experts of the water tribe of the Underworld River. Their status in the water tribe is roughly the same as Li Guang's, but there are some who are even stronger. They should all be here to watch the Underworld River Black Carp race leap through the Dragon Gate. Yu Qianzhou immediately looked around again, wanting to memorize the appearances of the experts of the Underworld River's water tribe. Perhaps he would be able to use them when he had dealings with them in the future. But given his cultivation and the poor eyesight in the underworld, he could not see clearly even a little further. It was truly a pity. But what he did not know was that he and Sung Yin, two people of the immortal realm, had mingled with Li Guang's children in front of him, attracting the attention of many people. Especially Sung Yin's mid-stage immortal emperor cultivation and his own unfathomable cultivation. Quite a few experts of the Underworld River's water tribe secretly memorized their appearances. Most likely, even Sung Yin himself hadn't expected this. He had come to the netherworld with Yu Qianzhou while suppressing his resentment. However, he had made the mysterious experts of the Netherworld River's water race remember him. With a loud rumble, a purple thunderbolt suddenly burst out from the purple halo and once again struck the Dragon Transformation Gate. The violet lightning swam through the Dragon Transformation Gate, and an ancient and majestic chi once more rippled through the surroundings. The violet halo in the sky suddenly expanded, its radiance growing even more dazzling. It's here. No one knew who suddenly let out a cry of surprise, but everyone's gazes immediately focused on the sky. Amidst the purple halo, a dazzling starlight shone and drilled out. The dazzling dot of starlight grew larger and larger as it leisurely rushed over from the sky. What is this thing? Yu Qianzhou's voice suddenly appeared in the quiet surroundings. Yu Qianzhou looked at the sky in shock and pulled on Sung Yin's sleeve, completely unaware of how much of a wet blanket he was. How would I know? Sung Yin looked at him like he was looking at an idiot, and flicked his sleeve, telling him not to disturb him. In reality, Yu Qianzhou had only subconsciously asked, and his attention had already been attracted by the dot of starlight. Even though he had asked Sung Yin, he did not listen to Sung Yin's reply, as if he had no intention of disturbing Sung Yin. Sung Yin resentfully turned his head to look at the sky. Fortunately, everyone's attention was on the sky, and no one was willing to pay attention to these two fellas. The dazzling dot of starlight got closer and closer, and everyone could already see the outline of the dot of starlight. Within the glass-like glow, there was a carriage that flew over. There was nothing special about the carriage. It was an open carriage that looked like bronze, and there was a bent umbrella handle at the back. The roof of the carriage was supported by a canopy, and together with the wheels of the carriage, the entire carriage seemed to be made of bronze. What surprised everyone was that the two steeds that were pulling the carriage looked sturdy, but their bodies were as transparent as crystal. There was no flesh or blood in their bodies, and they were crystal clear, as if they were made of glass. The two transparent steeds galloped in the air, and the crystal silk-like mane on their necks and backs fluttered in the wind. They could be said to be divine and extraordinary. As the carriage got closer, they could see the ancient cloud patterns on the carriage, but the carriage was empty. The two transparent steeds pulled the empty carriage, and after descending above the dragon transformation gate, they spread out their hooves, and with the dragon transformation gate as the center, they galloped in a circle. Under the envelopment of the glass-like glow, the entire carriage was so mysterious, and it made people feel that it was so magical, so unbelievable. Oh my! What is the meaning of this? Yu Qianzhou's eyeballs followed the carriage in a circle, and he muttered in a silly manner. Sanyan Xian also sighed with emotion. If it was said that he was stifled before, now he felt that this trip was worth it, and he had broadened his horizons. Neigh, neigh. The two steeds suddenly let out a long neigh that pierced through the night sky, and under everyone's gaze, their beautiful manes fluttered in the wind as they turned around and slowly descended on the dragon transformation gate. After taking a few steps on the mountain peak, the clear sound of horse hooves could be heard, and the two transparent steeds sneezed a few times before stopping. Just at this moment, the glass-like glow that enveloped the carriage suddenly exploded with light, and illuminated the entire night sky, causing everyone to not dare to open their eyes. When the light weakened and everyone opened their eyes, they saw that the glass-like glow on the carriage had already enveloped the entire dragon transformation gate. The 100-meter-tall mountain that towered over the underworld river emitted a glass-like glow, and everyone could clearly see every corner of the mountain. It was abnormally dazzling, and people could not help but sigh in admiration. This was truly worthy of being the legendary dragon transformation gate. Paw paw. Two whips sounded out, and after the two vanguards of the Li Palace waved their braids, the Li Guang couple had already flashed to the surface of the water, and the couple unhesitatingly knelt on the surface of the water. As the couple knelt, all the members of the Li Palace, from top to bottom, knelt towards the dragon transformation gate. Even Xiao Yuan, who was behind Yu Qianzhou, sensibly flashed out, and joined his brothers and sisters in kneeling down. Under the lead of the couple, all the members of the Li Palace respectfully and devoutly began to kowtow 3 times and kowtow 9 times on the surface of the underworld river. Chapter 1004. At this moment, all eyes were focused on this sacred and solemn scene. Other than the members of the Underworld River's water tribe standing on the surface of the Underworld River, there were also quite a few experts hidden in the darkness watching this scene from the dark night sky. Everyone might argue or fight over other matters, but today, the main character of this scene belonged to the Li Palace Black Carp clan of the water tribe of the Underworld River. No one dared to raise their glory. Because this was the glory that the ancestors of the Underworld River Black Carp clan had exchanged for with endless blood, tears, and suffering. It was a glory that would benefit their descendants for generations to come. The ancient dragon gate that stood in the middle of the Underworld River, the Pegasus that pierced through the sky, all of them spoke of the vicissitudes of history that had passed countless years ago. As the descendants of the later generations, they had no way to repay the kindness that their ancestors had accumulated through blood and tears. They could only worship with excitement and piety. As someone who did not know of this past event, Yu Qianzhou only felt that this group of people were really boring. Wasn't it just a carriage that pierced through the sky? Was there a need to pay such great respects? While he was disdainful, he was also somewhat glad that he had finally gotten rid of that unlucky child. He loosened the lapels of his clothes and pulled them up, feeling much more comfortable. But what made him not know whether to laugh or cry was that after this group of water tribe members paid their respects and stood up, little Yuan once again rushed over, his small face flushed with excitement. He once again tightly grabbed onto Yu Qianzhou's robes, as if he was afraid that he would run away. His robes had been pulled askew again. This was really damaging to his image. There were also beauties present. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. He secretly tried to pull back, but little Yuan refused to let go, as if he had his eyes set on him. Helpless, Yu Qianzhou could only let him do as he pleased. Because at this moment, Li Guang's tiger eyes were wide open and he was excitedly sweeping his gaze over his subjects. It was not convenient for Yu Qianzhou to let him see that he was bullying his son. His hand that was secretly trying to snatch little Yuan's robes loosened, and the collar of his robes tightened around his neck again. Other than "fuck," Yu Qianzhou had no words to describe his current mood. The grace of our ancestors extends to our descendants for generations to come. Since ancient times, we must not neglect the kindness of our ancestors. We must follow it from generation to generation. Li Guang's agitated voice rang out, his tiger-like eyes glowing red from excitement. He looked around at the members of the Li Palace and said, "I, the Black Carp race of the Nether River, await your instruction." As long as they had tried it the last time, they would avoid it. Those who hadn't tried it before, but felt that they had the strength to do so, could give it a try. However, the ancient teachings must be kept in mind. After this attempt, if you fail, you will lose the chance to try again. Please consider for yourself whether or not you should wait for the next time to try again. With that said, he waved his hand. Paw paw. Two whipping sounds immediately rang out, and a large area of water around the dragon transformation sect immediately became strange. The water waves stirred, and countless Nether River black carps swam from the bottom of the water to the surface. Their dorsal fins and tails were everywhere moving on the water surface. All eyes were focused on this area of water. Many of the Nether River black carps hesitated for a while. Many of the smaller ones, perhaps feeling that they did not have the confidence to leap over the dragon gate, calmly sank back into the water after their excitement. These were the majority. There were still several hundred left, but all of them were at least 5 or 6 meters long. Just their backs that stuck out of the water was a long line. At this moment, the side of the dragon transformation sect facing Li Guang and his wife was also the side Yu Qianqiu and the others were standing on. The several hundred massive Nether River black carps suddenly parted, their enormous backs sticking out of the water forming 2 long lines, leaving a 10-some meter wide channel in the middle. The black carp at the very end swam out of the formation, and quickly swam to the front of the channel. It turned around, paused in the water, and suddenly broke through the waves like a shuttle. In an instant, it was dozens of meters away from the dragon transformation sect. With a schwa sound, its 5-meter-long body fiercely shot out of the water, and with a slight angle, it directly shot towards the dragon gate. This action, not only Li Guang and the other water races, even the usually indifferent Yu Qianqiu became worried. He hoped that this black carp would leap over the dragon transformation sect, and then witness the legendary scene of transforming into a dragon. Even Xiao Yuan, who was behind him, excitedly grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's robe. Yu Qianqiu immediately cursed his ancestors in his heart. His neck being strangled was a small matter, but having his clothes torn in front of everyone was too unsightly. However, it was not good to scold him, much less use his hands or feet to kick him. His sullen waist slowly bent as his clothes were pulled. That black carp that was swimming towards the glazed light that enveloped the entire dragon transformation sect seemed to be swimming against the current of a waterfall, its body agilely swaying in the light as it swam upwards. Yet, when it was not even halfway up the river, its speed of ascension became slower and slower. Its body began to move more and more rapidly, as if it wanted to swim upwards with all its might. However, after advancing 2 or 3 meters, it was unable to advance any further. After a stalemate in the light for a while, it finally regretfully fell down. Amidst the sounds of regret, its enormous body smashed into the surface of the Nether River with a dong sound, and disappeared into the water, never to come out again. At this time, anyone could see that the biggest reason why the Dragon Gate was difficult to leap over was probably because of the glazed light coming from the carriage standing on the mountain top. Thinking about how the carriage was able to break through the air, the glazed light on its body was definitely not ordinary. It was natural that it was difficult to break through. Among the 2 groups of Nether River black carps on the surface of the water, several dozens suddenly quietly disappeared into the water, no longer appearing. Presumably, these several dozen were estimating that their strength was about the same as the one that had just taken the lead. After weighing their strength, they felt that there was no need to make a pointless attempt. It was better to wait until their strength increased, and then calmly wait for the next Dragon Gate call to try their skills. This empty Pegasus carriage, I wonder who will be lucky enough to sit on it, and who will be able to transform into a dragon and soar through the air? The one speaking was a woman. It was the second princess of the Li Palace, standing in front of Yu Qianqiu. When these words were spoken, the gazes of the brothers and sisters all fell on the quiet, empty carriage at the top of the mountain, each of them revealing an expression of envy. Only the third princess, who had appeared first, still had a calm and indifferent expression, as if she was not too interested in the matter of leaping over the dragon gate. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Exian glanced at each other, both revealing an expression of sudden understanding. They had previously been wondering why the Pegasus carriage had made such a big scene, pulling an empty carriage through the air. It turned out that only after leaping over the dragon gate and transforming into a dragon would a black carp have the right to ride the Pegasus carriage through the air. Grey Cloud Exian's gaze then froze. Only now did he realize that Yu Qianqiu was standing there with his shoulders crooked like a loafer. When he saw little Yuan, who was tugging at his clothes, he immediately gave Yu Qianqiu an expression of schadenfreude. You deserve it. At this time, the people of the hidden Dragon Mountain Villa in the distance, after witnessing the miraculous scene of the Pegasus carriage descending, were truly shocked. Unfortunately, because they were afraid of causing trouble, they had stayed a little too far away. They could not see the scene clearly, let alone hear what the people there were saying. From time to time, the gazes of the group would turn towards Grey Cloud Exian and Yu Qianqiu, who were still standing among the people of the river Styx's water race. They could not help but admire the extraordinary courage of these two. It was truly a great pity that they could not stand close enough to clearly see such a spectacle. But now, they did not have the courage to approach again. Not to mention the numerous experts of the river Styx's water race on the surface of the water, even in the sky, they could vaguely see experts hiding. Occasionally, they would even glance at them with unfriendly gazes. It's a pity that before father left, he said that as the royalty of the river Styx's black carp, we have to give way to our clansmen when it comes to matters of right and wrong. We can only be ranked last. The first princess sighed slightly, her expression somewhat unwilling. That's right. The second princess also sighed slightly. It's a pity that every time the Pegasus carriage descends, it will only take away one of our clansmen who has leaped into the dragon gate. We don't know when the next time will be. I heard that there was once a clansman who succeeded in leaping into the dragon gate before our royal family. In the end, we, the members of the royal family, did not even have the chance to try. Yu Qianqiu and Sang Yun, whose shoulders were tilted and whose movements were strange, looked at each other with confidence. The two of them exchanged glances, thinking that they had learned another secret. It turned out that the Pegasus carriage would only take away one person who succeeded in leaping into the dragon gate each time. The great crown prince of Li Palace, who stood at the head of the group, slowly turned his head and glanced at his two younger sisters. He coldly snorted and said, "It seems that my two younger sisters are certain of victory in this dragon gate leap. Since you're confident, you can charge out and try. Once you leap into the dragon gate, not even father can stop you. I'm afraid that you're still worried that you won't succeed and will be severely punished by father afterwards." His tone was somewhat unkind. The first princess immediately retorted, "From what eldest brother says, you seem to be more confident than we are. Then why don't you do as you say and charge out and set an example for us?" She then changed the topic and said, "Second brother, third brother, don't you think what I said makes sense?" Yu Qianqiu instantly tilted his shoulders in amusement. He didn't think that the royal family of the water tribe was not inferior to the royal family of the human realm. Even siblings were scheming against each other. Just as he was wondering if these unfilial children of his would do something out of line, he suddenly realized that his siblings were all as quiet as cicadas in winter. He instinctively turned his head to look, and sure enough, Li Guang was already glaring at them angrily. At this moment, one of the two rows of black carps on the surface of the river Styx had already come out to make its preparations. After a moment of preparation, it broke through the waves with a whoosh, its speed far faster than the previous one. Before it even reached the foot of the mountain, there was a splash as a giant black carp, 7 to 8 meters in size, shot out. Piercing through the glazed light, it instantly covered half of the distance to the 100-meter mountain. Once it slowed down, its body quickly twisted like a migrating fish swimming against the current of a waterfall. Very quickly, it rose another 20 meters, and was only 20 meters away from its destination. What was most worrying was that its momentum was still not exhausted. Its enormous body was rapidly moving, and it continued to advance meter by meter. Beautiful. Yu Qianqiu's mouth was agape, and he was just short of applauding and cheering. In any case, to him, it didn't matter who transformed into the dragon gate. It had nothing to do with him. However, its shoulders tilted even more, and its clothes were stretched taut. The little fellow behind it was indeed a little too excited. Chapter 1005. Why was he so excited? Yu Qianqiu could tell from the strength and rhythm of the kid's tugging that it was as if he wasn't tugging at his clothes, but the fishtail that was trying its best to reach him. It was as if he wanted to pull the other party down. His intentions were unfathomable. In the end, just as he wished, that netherworld river black carp couldn't move forward even an inch when it was only a dozen meters away from the top. Under the scouring of the treasured glaze light, its body slowly slid down. In the end, it gave up due to its lack of cultivation and fell down. With a bang, it made a regretful splash in the netherworld river. Amidst the cries of regret, Yu Qianqiu's hand that was holding onto Yu Qianqiu's back gradually loosened its grip. Everyone could now see that the colored glaze light enveloping the dragon transformation gate exerted greater pressure the closer one got to the top. It was difficult for those without great abilities to reach the top and become a dragon in one leap. This colored glaze light undoubtedly had a screening function. Not every nether river black carp could pass its test. Although this nether river black carp had failed, the fact that it was only a dozen meters away from the top made the other nether river black carps below excited. They all saw the hope of success. It still started from the back. A nether river black carp swam close to Li Guang. After making some preparations, it broke through the waves like an arrow released from a bow. As it neared the dragon transformation gate, it vigorously leapt up. Its 7 or 8 meter body was about the same size as the previous one, and its speed and strength were not any weaker. It resisted the enormous pressure exerted by the colored glaze light and soared up, fighting against fate. Damn it! It's here again. Yu Qianqiu felt like he was going to go crazy. Xiao Yuan's demonic claws were using the 1,000 catty drop on him again. He now hated himself for being so gluttonous that he had thrown out his pole to catch this demonic star to torture himself. People said that one would stink if they didn't eat mutton. He was a nether river black carp who didn't eat mutton and got stink. Coming to the netherworld was truly retribution. Looking at the surface of the nether river, there were still more than 200 nether river black carps lining up to leap through the dragon transformation gate. These 200. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept around, finally landing on the Li Palace's third princess who happened to be standing right in front of him. Recalling the scene of him grabbing that rotten little child and asking for his sister to save him, his eyes instantly lit up. There was no doubt that the third princess still had a place in the fourth prince's heart, so he should be able to discipline her. Third princess. Here, behind you. Hee hee. The Li Palace's third princess, who was currently looking up at the black carp leaping through the dragon gate, heard someone's voice and looked left and right. When he finally turned around, he immediately saw Yu Qianqiu smiling bitterly at him. Yu Qianqiu stood there with his body askew. His movements were abnormally awkward because his robe was being pulled by his younger brother. The third princess immediately turned around and nodded apologetically at Yu Qianqiu. She then glared at her brother who was staring at the dragon transformation sect and whispered, "Little Yuan, don't be rude." Xiao Yuan looked at his sister blankly, not knowing where he had gone wrong. The third princess could only glare at him and personally pull away Xiao Yuan's hand that was tugging on Yu Qianqiu's robe. "I've finally escaped from this unlucky child's clutches." Yu Qianqiu smiled at the third princess in a refreshed and gentlemanly manner, casually tidying up his robe that was a complete mess. The third princess pulled Xiao Yuan's hand, frowned and reprimanded him in a low voice, "Stand in front of me." "No. I want to be with brother Yu." Xiao Yuan's attitude was very stubborn, as if he was determined to be with him for the rest of his life. His other hand once again grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's robe. Yu Qianqiu was not prepared at all and stumbled from the tug. His expression twitched and he looked innocently at the third princess, as if saying, "Big sister, please discipline me." The third princess felt extremely apologetic for her brother's rash actions and shyly bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Anger flashed across her face as she said in a low voice, "Be obedient and stand in front of me." No. Xiao Yuan hugged Yu Qianzhou's arm with one arm. The commotion caused by the two sisters attracted the attention of the brothers and sisters in front of them. Even Li Guang and his wife glared at them, as if reprimanding the siblings for still being in the mood to play at a time like this. It was simply too outrageous. The third princess was suffering in silence and could only glare at her brother angrily. However, it was not convenient for her to continue tugging and pulling, so she took Xiao Yuan's hand and stood beside him. Beside them, Zhangyan Xian glanced sideways at Yu Qianzhou, the corners of his mouth curling into a mocking smile. Yu Qianzhou looked at Xiao Yuan, who was tugging at him, and suddenly had a very strange feeling. There was a child standing between the man and woman. Why did it feel like? Raising his head, he coincidentally bumped into the third princess, who was looking up at the same time. The two froze at the same time, both faintly feeling that they were thinking of the same thing. Yu Qianzhou was very good at concealing his thoughts. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth, as if to prove that he was very pure and had not let his thoughts run wild. But the third princess averted her gaze, a blush rising to her face as she quickly turned her head away. With a bang, the Netherworld River black carp followed in its footsteps. Just like the previous one, it failed on the verge of success when it was only 10-some meters away from the top. Soon after, 3 or 4 Nether River black carps, which were also 7 or 8 meters in size, attempted to leap over the dragon gate, but all of them failed when they were only 10 meters away from the peak. This short distance of 10 meters seemed like an insurmountable moat, causing the Li Palace's members to sigh in regret. Just as these Netherworld River black carps failed, over 100 similar Netherworld River black carps quietly disappeared from the 2 lines on the surface of the Netherworld River. It was obvious that they had retreated in the face of difficulties. In truth, this was a wise move. Retreating in the face of difficulties and waiting for an opportunity to try again might give them a greater chance of success. However, no one dared to guarantee when the next opportunity would appear. This was also the main reason why everyone was so anxious to try when an opportunity presented itself. At this moment, there were only 100 or so black carps left on the surface of the river, and they were naturally all of extraordinary strength. Strangely, their formation had fallen into disarray. The school of black carps had gathered together, as if discussing something. Not long after, the princes and princesses standing in front of Yu Qianzhou all paled. The first princess said in a low voice, "Not good, the Prime Minister is about to act." The school of Netherworld River black carps retreated to the side, leaving behind the largest Netherworld River black carp that slowly swam in front of Li Guang. Li Guang gave a slight nod, as if silently agreeing to something. Only then did the black carp turn around and begin its preparations. A moment later, a dorsal fin noiselessly swept across the surface of the water. As soon as it reached the bottom of the dragon transformation gate, a huge black carp over 20 meters long charged straight into the colored glass light. It quickly soared to a height of 60 to 70 meters, then began its second wave of strength. In an instant, it had reached a height of 80 meters, but its momentum did not stop there, and it directly broke through the height of 90 meters. Good! Li Guang yelled and excitedly clapped his hands. Everyone stared nervously at the giant figure, watching it approach the peak bit by bit. Although its speed was getting slower and slower, the frequency of its head and tail swaying was getting faster and faster. It was getting closer and closer, meter by meter. When they were less than 5 meters away from the top of the mountain, the 2 Pegasi that were dragging the carriage on the top of the mountain suddenly leaped up and stood up on their hind legs. They shook their crystal silky manes and let out a long neigh. The colored glass light that enveloped the entire mountain suddenly overflowed with flowing light and became denser. The huge Netherworld River black carp's body paused in the colored glass light, and it even showed signs of slowly pressing down. However, the Prime Minister, who could make the princes and princesses change their expressions, was obviously not an ordinary Netherworld River black carp's strength. It slowly swayed its head and tail again, and its dark scales suddenly erupted with a dark light. It resisted the colored glass light and slowly climbed up again. There was only 4 meters left, 3 meters, 2 meters left. Everyone held their breaths and focused, witnessing the miracle that was about to happen. The 2 Pegasi on the peak also lowered their heads and looked at him. The distance between them was only 2 meters, but it was this distance that the Prime Minister actually stopped and could not advance any further. All the Netherworld River black carps felt their hearts leap to their throats. There were only 2 meters left. The Pegasi were already very close. Ah! The Prime Minister suddenly let out a muffled groan of pain. His body, which was frozen in the glazed light, began to tremble, and one of the large black scales on his body suddenly fell off and was sent flying by the glazed light. From this, one could see just how much pressure he was under. All the members of the Lee Palace's water tribe paled. But this was only the first scale. As he continued to remain in a stalemate, a second scale slowly fell off and was sent flying, then a third, a fourth. In a few moments, 10 odd scales fell off one after another and dark blood began to seep out. But the moment the blood appeared, it was immediately vaporized by the colored glass light. Those who did not know what was going on were momentarily stunned. It turned out that not only could this colored glass light exert immense pressure, it was also abnormally hot. Just when more than half of the scales on his body had fallen off, the trembling Prime Minister suddenly let out another groan of pain. This heavy groan of pain echoed through the pitch-black sky. His body exploded with a dense black light. His head and tail began to slowly sway back and forth as his body began to rise once more. 1 meter, just when his massive head was about to reach the peak of the mountain. Good, good. Cheers of success erupted from below. Suddenly, the Prime Minister's head tilted to the side and his eyes lost their light. Starting from his gigantic head, cracks began to appear, and his body immediately lost its mobility. As he fell, his gigantic body, which was more than 20 meters long, began to break into pieces. His bones and flesh flew out and scattered all over the place. The crowd could only watch as he was transformed into flying ash by the colored glass light, annihilated, until not even a speck of his remains remained. Prime Minister! Li Guang cried out in alarm. All the members of the Lee Palace's water tribe were speechless. The various water tribe experts watching from a distance all sighed and sighed. This Prime Minister of the Lee Palace was far too eager to show off. He had already surpassed the limits of his strength, so why did he need to put on a brave front and throw away his life? Chapter 1006. Dead. Yu Qianqiu speechlessly looked at the sorrowful Lee Palace water tribe. In his last life, he had heard of the carp leaping over the dragon. It seemed like a very cool legend, but he didn't think that such a cool thing would also have life-threatening dangers. TSK. As he sighed, Yu Qianqiu felt the small hand holding his arm tremble. Looking at little Yuan who had his head lowered, he guessed that she had been frightened. Even with the Prime Minister's early stage Underworld Emperor cultivation, then with our cultivation, how can we succeed? The first princess at the front said somewhat dejectedly. Her previous chances of success had already disappeared. Legend has it that the ancestors of my Styx Black Carp clan who transformed into a dragon all succeeded after forming good karma with others. The Crown Prince sighed lightly. Is it really like this? And what is this so-called good karma? When the Crown Princes and Princesses heard this, they frowned in thought. When Xiao Yuan heard this, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu. However, Yu Qianqiu was currently raising his head and taking the time to appreciate the 2 celestial horses that were standing on top of the dragon transformation gate. He wondered how there could be transparent horses in this world, and where exactly did these 2 horses come from? He was completely unaware that little Yuan, who had just suffered a blow, was currently looking at him with stars in her eyes. Who else wants to try? Li Guang stood back on top of the one-horned water rhinoceros. Looking around at the water tribe under his command, he said in a sorrowful tone, anyone can try, I won't stop you. But everyone saw what happened to the Prime Minister. I hope that everyone will act within their abilities and not be impulsive. Who else wants to try? The nearly 100 Nether River black carps that had revealed their true forms slowly sank back into the water. None of them had a higher cultivation than the great Prime Minister, and the majority of those that were stronger than the great Prime Minister had wasted their opportunity to leap through the Dragon Gate. Most of them had also not come and were guarding the Lee Palace. When they were discussing before, they didn't want to make any pointless attempts and waste an opportunity, cutting off the possibility of success in the future. Therefore, they recommended the Prime Minister, who had the highest cultivation base. But who would have thought that the Prime Minister was so strong? Not only did he not succeed, he even lost his life. After witnessing such a tragic situation, which of these people, whose cultivation was lower than the Prime Minister's, would dare to take the risk? He could only watch from afar and shrink back. The crown princes and princesses, who had been eager to give it a try at first, were now all ashen-faced. No one said anything about the imperial family anymore. They realized that in the face of life and death, everyone was equal. Hee. Li Guang stood on the horned water rhinoceros and shook his head with a bitter smile. It seems like my Nether River Black Carp clan will have to let down the efforts of our ancestors this time. Never mind. Prepare to send off the Pegasus. At this moment, little Yuan, who had been blinking his big eyes, finally could not hold it in any longer. Hearing that his father wanted to end this Dragon Gate leap, his childish voice immediately rang out in the night sky, interrupting Li Guang's words. Father. I'm willing to try. The consequences of these words could be imagined. The Water Tribe experts who had been preparing to leave after seeing the Pegasus return froze, and the experts hidden in the air also froze. The crown princes and princesses of the Li Palace in front all turned their heads. Everyone's eyes were focused on little Yuan, who had a ponytail, a golden chain around his neck, and a black dudu. The experts in the distant waters immediately laughed, and someone even loudly said, Li Guang, this should be your little son who still smells of his mother's milk. His courage is truly commendable. Hee. The people around him roared with laughter. This kid has gone crazy. I don't know who didn't watch him well enough to let him escape. Even his brothers and sisters were complaining, blaming him for making everyone lose face. The third princess angrily pulled on little Yuan and reprimanded, Little Yuan, what nonsense are you talking about? After a while, Li Guang and his wife looked at each other, then Li Guang shouted, how improper. I'll take care of you when we get back. Father. Didn't the ancient teachings of my Nether River Black Carp clan say? Any disciple of my Nether River Black Carp clan can try, no one is allowed to stop them. Little Yuan indignantly argued, Little Yuan is also a disciple of the Nether River Black Carp clan, so why can't I try? As a child, he had no idea of his parents' painstaking efforts. It wasn't that his parents wanted to stop him, but that they knew that with his current cultivation, it was simply impossible for him to make the dragon leap, so they didn't want him to waste this chance. Once he grew up and his cultivation reached a certain level, his parents naturally wouldn't stop him anymore. For a moment, Li Guang was at a loss for words. It must be known that no matter how great Li Guang was, he couldn't surpass the teachings of his ancestors, and he didn't dare to openly oppose them. The empress standing next to Li Guang immediately frowned and waved her hand, saying, Little Yuan, what are you doing? Come here, come to mother's side. The third princess immediately grabbed little Yuan's arm, wanting to drag him to her mother's side so that he wouldn't embarrass himself here. This unlucky child could finally get out of here. Yu Qianqiu did his best to turn his head to the side, suppressing his laughter so that it wouldn't look good in front of the Li Palace's water tribe. However, his snickering appearance was no different from that of an old fox that had stolen a chicken. To the side, Zhangyan Xian also shook his head with a smile, lamenting that a newborn calf really wasn't afraid of a tiger, always doing things that made people laugh their teeth off. Brother Yu, have you forgotten that you said you would help me? Yu Qianqiu instantly couldn't laugh anymore. He felt his arm tighten and slowly turned his head around. He saw that the third princess was pulling little Yuan, while little Yuan was tugging at his sleeve, looking at him pitifully. He immediately pulled at his sleeve guiltily, but it wasn't good to be violent in front of his parents. For a moment, he couldn't break free, so he awkwardly said, You must have remembered wrongly. When did I ever say I would help you? Be good. Hurry and go to your mother's side. The third princess was also angry, her pretty face turning frosty as she said, Little Yuan, be good. As she spoke, she was about to forcefully take little Yuan away. No. Little Yuan stubbornly shook his head and stared at Yu Qianqiu with infinite grievance. Brother you said you had a way to help me make the dragon leap. Could it be that you were lying to little Yuan? With these words, the third princess' hand, which was about to use force, froze. She raised her head in shock to look at Yu Qianqiu. It wasn't just her. Everyone's eyes were on Yu Qianqiu. The white-clothed scholar, who was hidden in the darkness, was mostly focused on the Pegasus carriage of the dragon transformation sect. Nothing else could attract his attention. At this moment, the silver-armored soldier next to him suddenly exclaimed, "Who is this person? I can't even see through his cultivation. When did the immortal realm have such a powerful person?" "Which one?" the scholar asked faintly and looked in the direction that the silver-armored soldier was pointing at. His pupils suddenly shrank and a faint white light appeared in his eyes. When the white light disappeared, he heaved a sigh of relief. He must have used some special camouflage technique. In fact, he is only at the early minor immortal stage. He is just a pawn that has just stepped into the immortal gate. There is no need to make a fuss. So that's how it is. The silver-armored soldier nodded slowly. His gaze more or less focused on Enchanting. He was a little surprised by his intermediate immortal emperor cultivation. He muttered, "That's the attire of the Heartless Palace." "It's not the Heartless Palace. Could it be the chief consecrator, Enchanting?" After a short pause, his gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu again. He nodded with some understanding. "The early minor immortal stage. I know who this person is. He should be the World Commerce Chamber's sect leader Yu Qianqiu, who is causing trouble in the immortal realm." "Oh. The Yu Qianqiu who Lord Jean ordered to compose?" The scholar's gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu again. At this time, he showed some interest. If Yu Qianqiu knew that this person had also heard of his great name, he wondered if he would feel honored. "Damn it. Why are you all staring at me?" Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. Back then, it was just a trick he had casually used to trick a child. What he said was over, and he did not take it to heart. In fact, he did not have any way to help him leap through the dragon gate. He thought he was just a child. He could have just fooled him for a while. Who knew that this stupid child would keep thinking about it? Yu Qianqiu now understood. No wonder this unlucky child kept pestering him. He really took what he said seriously. Seeing the surrounding gazes, he lowered his head and smiled awkwardly at little Yuan. "Little Yuan, you must have heard wrong. I only said that I hope you can leap through the dragon's gate. When did I say I had a way to help you leap through the dragon's gate? Hurry and go back to your mother. Listen to me." How could he dare to admit that he had used the pious worship of the Nether River Black Carp clan to fool someone, and the person he had fooled was the fourth prince of Li Palace? Enchanting sneered and secretly transmitted his voice. "Now you know how to be afraid? What happened to the daring and magnificent feat at the beginning? You actually wanted to eat the fourth prince of Li Palace. You have guts." Xin Yu, who had been standing silently to the side, also looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. "Woo-woo. No, you said it before." Little Yuan immediately began to sob. Letting go of his hand, he pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose and sobbed. "You said that you were called Yu Qianqiu, the Yu from leaping through the dragon's gate. You said that the two of us were fated and that I should call you Big Brother Yu." He then turned to Enchanting and Xin Yu. They all heard it. They can testify that it was clearly you who used a fishing rod to. The word fishing rod caused Yu Qianqiu to stagger. He hurriedly took little Yuan from the third princess's hands and pressed little Yuan's head against his chest. He even pretended to gently stroke little Yuan's head to comfort him, coaxing, "Little Yuan, be good, don't cry, don't cry." In reality, he was pressing little Yuan's mouth against his chest to prevent him from continuing. But it was still a little too late. To the vast majority of the underworld river's water tribes, the word fishing rod was a word they abhorred, especially to a school of carp. At this moment, it was not only the Nether River Black Carp clan that had darkened their faces. Even quite a few of the experts of the underworld river's water tribes in the distance gradually became savage. Fishing rods, fishing nets, and the like were absolute humiliation to them, a very, very great humiliation. A normal person would avoid mentioning these words in front of them, but now, someone was using these things in the underworld river. Chapter 1007. Yu Qianqiu casually glanced at them a few times and felt too embarrassed to look again. He was very depressed in his heart. With his eyes, he could tell that he had angered everyone. It was supposed to be a good thing. It's all this unlucky child's fault. Yu Qianqiu's hand exerted a little more force and pressed little Yuan's head, which was about to raise, against his chest. He thought that it would be better to take this unlucky child as a hostage. It was better for him to leave first. After thinking about it, there was nothing for him to be afraid of. At most, he wouldn't be able to stay in the netherworld anymore. But it wasn't like there weren't any benefits. Grey Cloud Xian was dragged down by him. With so many experts around him, he would definitely die. How could Grey Cloud Xian not know his current situation? Looking at the atmosphere around him, he no longer had the mood to watch the show. He had already ravaged Yu Qianqiu 10,000 times in his heart, but it was still not enough. He felt that he was going to die because of Yu Qianqiu this time. He slowly hid his hands in his sleeves, ready to fight to the death. Beside him, Shen Yu's face was pale. He had a premonition that he would be dragged into this. It would be hard for him not to die. The scholar, who was hiding in the air, curled the corners of his mouth into a smile. He stared at the scene below and said, "I'm afraid that the handsome talent that Jin Taishang had personally selected is going to die a violent death. I wonder how Jin Taishang will feel when he hears about this. When this matter reaches the immortal realm, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. I'm afraid that Jin Tai will feel embarrassed. When that happens, will he?" Silver Armor Soldier frowned at the scholar and said, "Will Jin Tai come to the netherworld to punish us?" "Punish us? That depends on who it is." The scholar's gaze swept across the water clan on the netherworld river and he laughed. "If he dares to come to punish us, I will open the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld and welcome him in. I will not interfere and will even provide him with all the conveniences. But I'm afraid he won't have the guts." "That's right." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers cast their gazes at the ancient nether river, which was so long that they could not see the end of it. Standing on the back of the one-horned water rhinoceros, Li Guang and his wife's faces were ashen. They looked at Yu Qianqiu as if they wanted to skin him alive. Li Guang gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you dare to insult my son with a fishing rod. You should be hacked into pieces, and your bones burned to ashes." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. He didn't like hearing that. The world was big, so what if he used a fishing rod? What's more, your son didn't do anything. What right do you have to cut me into 1,000 pieces and grind my bones to dust? However, even though he thought this way, he still had to think of a way to salvage the situation. Unless he really didn't want to stay in the netherworld anymore, he had to think of a way to salvage the situation. He coughed and said, "You've misunderstood me. I really didn't mean to insult your son. In fact, I didn't know he was your son. Just imagine, if your son were to reveal his true form and mingle with a school of underworld river black carps, how could someone like me, who has never seen him before, know that he is the fourth prince of the Li Palace? Actually, release my fourth brother first." The crown prince of the Li Palace suddenly shouted angrily, interrupting, "My Li Palace imperial family is not something you can blaspheme." Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned his head and angrily shouted, "Who do you think you are? I am talking to your old man. When did it become your turn to interrupt? Could it be that the person in charge of the Li Palace isn't your father Li Guang, but you, the Crown Prince Li Zhong?" He was also a person with a reverse scale. How could a random person appear out of nowhere and yell at him? He immediately returned the favor. These words were vicious, and in the emperor's household, it would definitely be considered a death sentence. Crown Prince Li Zhong was almost speechless by these words, and his embarrassment turned into anger as he bared his teeth at his brothers and sisters. If we allow him to kidnap fourth brother and escape today, as his elder brothers and sisters, we will not have the face to see others in the future. Surround him, don't let him escape. After saying these words in front of everyone, the crown princes and princesses immediately surrounded Yu Qianqiu and the others. The third princess stood in front of Yu Qianqiu, coldly staring at him. Yu Qianqiu looked around and sneered, "A bunch of playthings from the same nest, do you think you're worthy of pretending to be brothers and sisters? I, Yu Qianqiu, am an indomitable spirit. I won't use a child as a hostage." As he spoke, he pushed Xiao Yuan, who was almost suffocating, into the arms of the third princess. The third princess was a little surprised, but she slowly carried Xiao Yuan out of the encirclement. Seeing that the other side had no hostages, Crown Prince Li Zhong suddenly laughed sinisterly. The underworld is not a place where people from the immortal realm can be arrogant. Old song. Yu Qianqiu directly ignored him and interrupted. Some people don't know the immensity of heaven and earth just because they have the title of Crown Prince. We are sent here by the Immortal Emperor and represent the Immortal Emperor. How can we let others humiliate us? If anyone dares to spout nonsense again, why don't you let him have a taste of your heartless palace's 3 swords in 1 sword unsheathing form? Let's see if he's good with words or if he's really capable with his hands. Hearing this, the underworld's water tribe's powerhouses were slightly shocked. They might not have heard of who Tsangyin Xian was, but they had definitely heard of the celestial world's heartless palace's sect master, Wang Qing, especially his 3 swords in 1 sword unsheathing form. In order to comprehend the sword technique, Wang Qing had once rampaged through the underworld. Many powerhouses had died under Wang Qing's 3 swords in 1 sword unsheathing form. None of them had the confidence to block this move. Hearing this, based on everyone's information, they could roughly confirm that these 2 fellows were indeed Heartless Palace's chief high priest Tsangyin Xian and World Commerce's sect master Yu Qianqiu from the celestial world. In fact, Li Guang was also quite wary of Tsangyin Xian's 3 swords in 1 sword unsheathing form. Otherwise, he would have given the order to kill them already. When the crown princes and princesses heard the 3 swords in 1 sword unsheathing form, their expressions all changed. Tsangyin Xian had no way out. Yu Qianqiu had even brought up the celestial emperor. Even if he had to die, he had to brace himself and fight. This might give him a sliver of a chance at survival. If he retreated, celestial emperor Jin Tai would be the first to come after him. He had no confidence in escaping Jin Tai's pursuit. He immediately stepped forward with an imposing manner and stared at Crown Prince Li Zhong like lightning. Crown Prince Li Zhong immediately felt a powerful pressure bearing down on him after being targeted by Tsangyin Xian. He panicked. He had naturally heard of the Heartless Palace's sword unsheathing form, and he had no confidence in blocking it. Only now did he realize that he had indeed been impulsive. Tsangyin Xian. Li Zhong shouted. No matter how powerful Celestial Emperor Jin Tai is, he can't control the water tribe of the underworld. My Li Palace has never had any dealings with your Heartless Palace. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but it's best if you don't interfere in our affairs. Otherwise, no matter how famous your Heartless Palace's sword unsheathing form is, the water tribe of the underworld will not let you come and go as you please. These words were already a concession. It would be a lie if Tsangyin Xian said that he wasn't tempted, but he knew that if he retreated now, Immortal Emperor Jin Tai would probably make his life a living hell. He had no choice but to say it out loud. Tsangyin Xian slowly closed his eyes. His blue robe and long beard fluttered without any wind. His hands were hidden in his sleeves as he stood there with his eyes closed. At this moment, Tsangyin Xian had the demeanor of Guan Yunchang. He stood there silently to show his attitude. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. No one dared to be the first to test the sharpness of his sword unsheathing form. Everyone knew that once the sword unsheathing form was used, the river Styx would be dyed red with blood. Big brother you. You said that you had a way to help me make the great leap. Little Yuan, who was in the third princess' hands, suddenly spoke in a childish voice. Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes. This unlucky child, if it weren't for your blabbering, things would not have turned out like this. At this moment, Li Guang, who was in a difficult position, gritted his teeth and said, "You Qianqiu, did you say anything to my son about helping him make the great leap?" The various experts on the surface of the underworld looked at each other. They could all hear that Li Guang's words were a little soft, and they couldn't help but feel a little helpless. No one here had the confidence to resist the sharpness of the Heartless Palace's sword unsheathing form, and the true experts of the underworld river had yet to show themselves. Otherwise, how could they have been frightened by Tsangyin Xian? Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned when he heard this. He immediately understood that the other party was giving him a way out of this embarrassing situation, and it was similarly giving him a way out of this embarrassing situation as well. If he didn't think of a way to salvage the situation, then both of them could only fight to the death. It's true that I said that, but there's a reason for it. Yu Qianqiu immediately explained with assurance. When I first arrived here, I suddenly saw a school of black carps in the river in front of me. One of them was faintly glowing. This glow was different from normal glows, as if it was possessed by a dragon. It was truly magical. I found it strange and wanted to see what it was. Thus, I took out a treasure that looked like a fishing rod and caught the thing that was possessed by the dragon. Who would have thought that it was actually the fourth prince of the Li Palace? Don't you think this is a huge misunderstanding? As soon as he said this, countless people silently cursed him for speaking nonsense, but no one pointed it out. They only heard Yu Qianqiu continue to ramble. When the fourth prince was caught by me, he felt extremely wronged. In order to comfort him, I told him that I had a way to help him make the great leap. Actually, it was just a way to coax a child. Who would have thought that he would take it seriously? I really didn't have the slightest intention of insulting the water tribe of the river Styx. I hope that your majesty will forgive my unintentional mistake. As he spoke, he cupped his hands. His attitude was very sincere. The surroundings were completely silent, and all eyes were on Li Guang. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Li Guang was about to go crazy. He thought to himself, you can just deny that you didn't do anything, and then I'll slowly investigate the truth. In the end, I'll just let it go. Now that you've come up with such a ridiculous reason, how am I supposed to get out of this situation? Don't even talk about fooling the adults with this reason. Little Yuan was the first to refuse, and stubbornly shouted, "No. Brother you definitely have a way." He then turned to Li Guang and shouted, "Imperial Father, little Yuan is also a member of the river Styx. According to the teachings of our ancestors, little Yuan also has the right to attempt the great leap." Chapter 1008. He had spoiled this unlucky child to the point that even the adults were worried about him. Yu Qianqiu sighed and shook his head. Right now, he was like a bystander who was watching the show. Actually, when Li Guang gave him a way out, it wasn't that he couldn't find a good reason with his mouth. In reality, when he saw how powerful Tsangyin Xian was and how no one dared to touch him, he immediately became vigilant. He had originally wanted to find a chance to borrow someone's knife to kill Tsangyin Xian after familiarizing himself with the Netherworld's environment. However, he didn't expect the Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique to be so powerful in the Netherworld. Who knew if anyone would dare to touch Tsangyin Xian in the future? Thus, he suddenly had an evil thought and wanted to take this opportunity. However, he didn't want to cut off his future in the Netherworld. It was truly a difficult choice. Helplessly, he came up with a far-fetched reason and kicked the ball back to Li Guang. He was prepared to do whatever he wanted, but once he realized that the situation wasn't right, he would immediately dive into the water and escape. Let him go, let him try. Li Guang, who had nowhere to vent his anger, waved his hand. He was already having a headache, and this youngest son kept bringing up the ancestral teachings to pressure him. He had never seen such an unfilial son before. This was truly intolerable, so he decided to let him do as he pleased. The Empress was a little anxious, but seeing Li Guang like this, she wanted to say something but hesitated. In order to maintain his authority, she finally shut her mouth and didn't say anything. The third princess was still hesitating as she looked at her parents. However, Xiao Yuan got off her arm and ran toward Yu Qianqiu on the water. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The corner of his mouth twitched as he thought to himself, "What are you doing here again?" As everyone expected, Xiao Yuan passed through the crowd of his brothers and sisters and grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's sleeve. He pointed at the dragon transformation gate and said, "Help me." Yu Qianqiu looked at Xiao Yuan and shook his head. He had never seen such a stubborn child. To put it nicely, it was called stubborn. He suspected that this child was the illegitimate child of the deceased Prime Minister and the Empress. Otherwise, why would his temper be so similar to that of the Prime Minister? Forget it. It's good that you give up on this idea, so that I don't have to be the center of attention all the time. Yu Qianqiu shrugged helplessly at the crowd. It didn't matter. Just like that, he was dragged away by the persistent Xiao Yuan. Under everyone's gaze, the two of them arrived at the foot of the transforming dragon sect that was enveloped by the colored glass treasure light. One big and one small raised their heads and looked up. From their angle, they could no longer see the heavenly horse treasure carriage. But the way the two of them stood there, it was hard to believe that they weren't father and son. Jump! With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianqiu nodded towards the top of the mountain and said perfunctorily. He was ready to let the little guy fail and give up as soon as possible. Xiao Yuan looked up at him, her large eyes blinking excitedly. "Brother Yu, help me." "What a joke. I don't have that kind of ability." Looking at the colored glass treasure light, Yu Qianqiu was a bit scared. His mind was filled with the scene of the Prime Minister being annihilated. Even a guy with the cultivation of the early stage of the Underworld Emperor ended up like that. What kind of joke was he, who was in the early stage of the minor immortal realm, playing? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How do you want me to help?" Xiao Yuan bit his finger and looked back at the colored glass treasure light. After thinking for a while like an adult, he said, "Xiao Yuan's cultivation is too low. I can't go up." "Why don't?" He was very self-aware. He knew that his cultivation was too low to go up. After a pause, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and said expectantly, "Why don't you carry me up?" Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. He said in surprise, "Carry you up? Are you kidding me? This is the Jumping Dragon Gate. Have you ever heard of anyone from your Nether River Black Carp clan being carried up after jumping the Dragon Gate? If that's the case, how is it you jumping the Dragon Gate? Isn't it me jumping the Dragon Gate?" Let alone him, the surrounding people were also shaking their heads. They all thought to themselves that the little guy was just a little guy. Li Guang's originally green face turned a little black. This was too ridiculous. Xiao Yuan pouted and said very naively, "It was you, brother Yu, who told me. Your name is Yu Qianqiu, Yu as in Jumping Dragon Gate. There's nothing wrong with you bringing Xiao Yuan along to jump the Dragon Gate." Yu Qianqiu was stunned by this little guy's extraordinary comprehension ability. His mind went blank for a while. "You're my grandpa. So that's how you understand it. No matter what, it's just that I have a cheap mouth." This was the first time he realized that he had lost so badly in a verbal argument. Most importantly, there was no reason to reason with this little brat. He couldn't even be calculative with him. "Brother Yu, help me." Xiao Yuan tugged on his sleeve and acted like a spoiled child. He was practically invincible when it came to using both the carrot and the stick. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to beat up the little guy in front of so many people. He pointed at the colored glass treasure light in front of him and said, "You mean, you want me to carry you up the mountain from here?" "Yes." Xiao Yuan nodded excitedly, taking it as a yes. He dove into the river Styx and turned into a huge black carp about a meter long. He swam a few rounds around Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the surface of the water. Then, he jumped out of the water and floated in front of Yu Qianqiu. He wagged his head and tail excitedly and said, "Brother Yu, carry me up." "Damn you." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes a few times. He raised his hand to wipe away the water droplets that the little guy's tail had splashed onto his face. This Styx River black carp, which was originally rather cute in appearance, was now completely unreasonable in his eyes. Brother, you. Don't hesitate. You can do it. I believe that you're the best, Xiao Yuan said with certainty. Although his words were simple, this kind of pure encouragement coming from the mouth of a little kid was quite effective against a black-hearted person like Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu scratched his face embarrassedly and asked tentatively, "Why don't we give it a try? But let me say the ugly words first. Failure is certain. Don't blame it on me when the time comes." This was definitely his style. He would always give a warning first. Yes. As long as brother Yu tries his best, it's fine. Xiao Yuan cheered and threw herself into Yu Qianqiu's arms without a care for the cost. Yu Qianqiu had no choice but to hug him. After a moment of hesitation, he moved step by step toward the uneven and swaying light. It was as if there was a bottomless abyss in front of him. When he reached the front, he stopped again and said with some difficulty, "Xiao Yuan, why don't you try jumping first? If it doesn't work, I'll try again." When these words were spoken, it was unknown how many people looked at him with disdain. Either you don't go, or you don't even have the courage to go through the motions. Who do you think you are? Even Sanyan Xian felt that it would be embarrassing to be with him in the future. Big brother Yu, this won't do. If I fall into the water when I try, it will be considered a failure according to the ancestral teachings. I can't try again, Xiao Yuan said very seriously. He. Then forget it. Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly. He held the big carp in one hand and reached out a finger. He raised his cultivation to the limit and slowly reached into the colored glazed light. He was going to test the waters first. The result surprised him. The temperature in the light was indeed very high, and the pressure was not small, but it was completely within his tolerance range. He inserted his finger into the light repeatedly, then changed to a palm, then to a fist. Finally, he stuck his entire arm in and shook it a few times. With this action, he did not care how many people were looking at him with disdain. His life was his, and how could he be compared to those who were just watching the show? After finally confirming that there were no problems, he directly dashed in with Xiao Yuan in his arms. Amidst Xiao Yuan's cheers, he raised his arms high and lifted Xiao Yuan above his head. He slowly flew up against the pressure. He had no pressure now. In any case, he had already tried. If he found that something was wrong, he could just go into the water and admit defeat. There was no need to risk his life. However, what he did not know was that the moment he charged in and the light enveloped his body, a golden light immediately erupted from his dantian, as if it had been activated by something. However, it only flashed for a moment before the golden light disappeared. The big carp he held above his head was covered in a faint layer of golden leaf. He was in the light, so he felt that there was a glistening yellow in front of him. It was as if he was wearing tinted glasses, so he did not notice anything. Instead, the expressions of the people outside all became solemn. They looked at Xiao Yuan in surprise. They could clearly see that, just a moment ago, Xiao Yuan's body had been covered in a faint layer of golden hair. At this moment, the yellow light around Xiao Yuan's body was clearly stronger than its surroundings, like a thin halo of light protecting him. How could this be? The silver-armored soldier in the air said in surprise. The scholar's gaze instantly sharpened as he stared at Xiao Yuan, as if he wanted to cut him open and examine him. Everyone had an expression of disbelief on their faces, especially the members of the Li Palace's water tribe, who did not even dare to breathe loudly. Li Guang and his wife had very complicated expressions. Although everyone had seen this strange phenomenon, until the very end, no one could be sure what effect this strange phenomenon would have, or whether some miracle would really occur. Xiao Yuan. Do you feel any discomfort? If you do, tell me immediately. Remember. It's fine if you fail. As long as you try your best, you won't have any regrets. Don't try to be brave. Yu Qianqiu raised Xiao Yuan up, bit by bit. This unscrupulous fellow said all sorts of nice words and all sorts of reasons, as if he was doing it for his own good. But he had Xiao Yuan act as the vanguard, because the previous example had made it clear that the higher they went, the more dangerous it would be. He was determined not to take the slightest risk for such an unreliable matter. Xiao Yuan clearly knew that the higher they went, the more dangerous it would be. His two carp eyes nervously stared up and he said, "Brother Yu, I understand. But for now, I don't seem to feel any discomfort. Brother Yu, do you feel anything?" I don't feel anything right now either. Let's take it slow, there's no rush." Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly. He lowered his head to look at his feet. It was only 5 or 6 meters, and he thought that if there was more pressure, he would have to go up a little more. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the speed at which the two of them ascended was truly unsightly. Occasionally, they would stop and ask each other if there was any discomfort. They were truly very careful. Chapter 1009. The two slowly ascended like this, attracting everyone's gaze. After a while, quite a few people realized that their eyes were a little tired from watching these two leap over the dragon gate. They wanted nothing more than to urge them to hurry up. If they could do it, then they could do it. If they couldn't, then they couldn't. Stop dawdling here. At first, the Li Palace Water Tribe members were very nervous, but after watching for a while, they got used to it. They could only look at each other speechlessly, as if they had never heard of someone leaping over the dragon gate like this. The tense bodies of the surrounding people gradually relaxed, and some even seemed bored to death. Who knew how long it would take to see the final result of these two? Why do I feel like this action is a little like the Statue of Liberty? A woman raises one arm, a man raises both arms. It's probably like this. Yu Qianqiu also felt that his actions were rather slow, and he even had time to let his imagination run wild. Looking around at the listless crowd, he couldn't help but sigh. It was better to just stand on the side and watch. Unlike him, who was in danger and was so nervous. Next time, he wouldn't randomly show his love. Looking at his feet, he realized that they were already more than 10 meters from the surface of the underworld river. Yu Qianqiu solemnly raised his head and asked, "Little Yuan, how do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "Oh. I'm fine, but I feel like I'm going a little slow." Little Yuan stared at him with his carp eyes and said honestly. The nervousness that could be seen in his eyes before was now beginning to wander around leisurely. "It's good to go a little slower, we're not in a hurry. It's better to be safe than sorry. Safety first," Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. Little Yuan very obediently gave an "oh," and the two clowns continued to slowly ascend. Hearing these words, some distant tyrant of the water tribe, probably someone with a fiery temper, couldn't bear to watch any longer and roared, "Yu Qianqiu, are you still a man? If you're a man, then be a little braver and go straight up. If you can do it, then you can do it. If you can't, then forget it." The voice reverberated across the surface of the underworld river. Who? Don't just stand there and talk." Yu Qianqiu raised his hands in surrender and quickly looked around and cursed. "Fuck. You're a man. You're brave. If you're capable, come at me. Let's swap. I also know how to make sarcastic remarks. I guarantee that I will urge you to hurry up. If you die in an accident, I will take care of your corpse and choose a good place to bury you." Ha! The group of water-kind warriors who had been watching the show burst into laughter. The person who roared seemed to be amused and scolded with a smile, "Bullshit. I want to see how you will die. I have already chosen a good place. It is at the foot of the Dragon Transformation sect. I am waiting to collect your corpse." Everyone. Li Guang floated into the air and cupped his hands towards the crowd. "Today is an important day for my Li Palace's water tribe. I hope that everyone can give me some face. This matter concerns my son's life. Please do not disturb him." As soon as he said that, the laughter gradually calmed down. Even if he did not give face to Li Guang, he still had to give face to the Pegasus that came from nowhere, 20 meters from the water. Yu Qianqiu looked down. He remembered that when the first Nether River black carp leapt through the dragon gate, it seemed to feel the pressure when it rose 20 meters and slowed down. He immediately raised his head and asked, "Little Yuan, how do you feel?" Little Yuan's carp eyes turned around and carefully sensed. After a pause, he said, "Nothing much, it's still the same." "It's still the same?" Yu Qianqiu muttered. He felt that something was wrong and warned again, "Little Yuan, I am preparing to increase my speed. If you feel anything wrong, tell me immediately." Brother Yu, I understand." Little Yuan replied excitedly. Truly, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. Yu Qianqiu sighed inwardly and immediately tried to increase his speed. 1 meter, 2 meters, he could only watch as the distance between him and the surface of the Nether River increased. When he rose to around 50 meters, he did not need to ask Little Yuan. He himself felt that something was wrong. At such a height, even with Little Yuan supporting him, he should have felt the pressure increase. Why was it still the same as before, with no reaction at all? Suspicious, he could not help but stop and carefully think about what was going on. In the eyes of the crowd, they initially thought that the two of them had already felt the pressure and could no longer continue, but looking at Yu Qianqiu's expression and behavior, it did not seem like it was difficult for them to continue. Little Yuan saw that they had risen so much and Yu Qianqiu had stopped and immediately shouted excitedly, "Brother Yu, I'm fine. I can go a little faster." It seemed that they were really fine. Yu Qianqiu could not figure out what had gone wrong, so he made up his mind and gritted his teeth. Following Little Yuan's words, he pushed Little Yuan up the mountain step by step at a normal walking speed. 60 meters from the surface of the Nether River, 80 meters. Everyone's eyes were fixed on them. The speed at which the two of them rose at a leisurely and relaxed pace was unbelievable. Li Guang and his wife looked at each other. There was not a trace of happiness on their faces, but astonishment instead. The crown princes and princesses of the Li Palace were also dumbfounded. However, at this time, Yu Qianqiu suddenly understood what the problem was. He believed that the carp leaping over the dragon gate was a task that could only be completed by the carp alone. Relying on the help of others was ineffective, or in other words, it was ineffective if humans intervened. In other words, Little Yuan was probably happy for nothing. So that was the case. Once Yu Qianqiu figured it out, he immediately felt no psychological burden. Maintaining a certain level of vigilance, he pushed Little Yuan and directly flew up. 20 meters. 10 meters, Brother Yu is almost there. Little Yuan was already cheering in advance. Yu Qianqiu also took the opportunity to put him down and hold him in his arms, their figures stabilizing in the air. At this time, the two of them had already reached the same height as the top of the mountain. Directly in front of them was the carriage of the Pegasus emitting a rich and simple aura. Two transparent precious horses were staring at them with their crystal-like eyes, their bodies shining brightly like statues standing at the top of the mountain. Everyone was staring at them without blinking. There were no cheers, and no applause. They were quietly waiting for what would happen next. Although the speed at which the two of them ascended was a little too slow, it was too easy. They couldn't help but ask themselves if this counted as leaping over the dragon gate. After being in a stalemate with the carriage of the Pegasus at the top of the mountain for a while, Little Yuan leisurely whispered into Yu Qianqiu's ear, "Should we go over?" Yu Qianqiu was also somewhat at a loss. He didn't know what to do next. He looked at the surface of the Nether River beneath his feet, then at the top of the mountain. He thought that before they reached the top of the mountain, they might not have succeeded in leaping over the dragon gate. He then pushed Little Yuan, who was in his arms, forward, and the two of them slowly floated to the top of the mountain. Everyone watched as Yu Qianqiu carefully placed his feet on the top of the mountain. At this time, Little Yuan had also transformed back into his human form and shyly was placed on the top of the mountain by Yu Qianqiu. Just as Little Yuan's feet touched the ground, the two Pegasus simultaneously straightened their four bodies and stomped their hooves, letting out a long neigh that resounded through the entire night sky for a long time. Just as the long neigh stopped, the glazed light that enveloped the dragon gate slowly retreated like flowing water, finally condensing into a resplendent ball of light on the carriage of the Pegasus. The condensed glazed light wriggled for a while, and suddenly, a huge head gradually rose from the glazed light, ferocious horns, a protruding forehead, a sharp nose, huge eyes, and a long mouth filled with dense fangs. Damn it, dragon. This was not the first time that Yu Qianqiu had seen such a thing, and he immediately recognized that it was a dragon head. However, he did not expect to see it for the second time, and at such a close distance at that. Just as he was about to slowly retreat and get ready to leave as soon as he realized something was wrong, he suddenly felt something touch his thigh. Wah! Wah! A loud and a small cry sounded on the mountain peak. Yu Qianqiu and Little Yuan dodged at the same time. When the former saw that it was Little Yuan, he immediately slapped his chest and scolded, "Why are you sneaking behind me? Are you trying to scare me to death?" Little Yuan did not care so much, and flashed behind him again, grabbing onto his clothes and poking his head out from behind. Looking at the ferocious head, he said carefully, "Little Yuan is scared." He was rather honest, and what he meant was to borrow his back to hide. Everyone was looking at the wondrous sight on the peak of the mountain in shock. They were also startled by the two people's shouts. They thought that something had happened to the two of them, so when they heard the two of them, they immediately looked at them with disdain. Even the scholar and Silver Armor army, who were hiding in the dark, could not help but look at each other. The scholar did not know whether to laugh or cry, and he muttered, "What a pair of clowns." After being frightened, Yu Qianqiu was more or less immune to it. He gathered his courage to take a closer look at the dragon head, and immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He discovered that it was only a lifelike shape formed by the glazed light, and was slightly transparent. It was not real at all. He immediately patted Little Yuan's head and said, don't be afraid, I'm here." "Brother Yu. Then what were you afraid of?" Little Yuan asked a question that he should not have asked, and in return, Yu Qianqiu sneered in disdain, "Tsk. I saw that you were not here, and I was afraid that something happened to you." At this moment, the dragon head slowly rose from the resplendent ball of light, and the body that it was dragging along also began to appear in the sky, and the dragon claws also appeared one by one. As the dragon rose into the sky, the resplendent ball of light that it had emerged from gradually shrank, until the dragon's tail appeared, and a small ball of light adorned the dragon's tail. At this point, the glazed light covering the Pegasus carriage had completely disappeared, and it had completely condensed into a glistening yellow dragon that was 50 to 60 meters long above the dragon transformation gate. It stood majestically in the night sky, and looked down on the entire netherworld. It was abnormally shocking. Standing on the dragon transformation gate, Yu Qianqiu and Little Yuan looked up with their mouths wide open. Everyone's gaze was also focused on the dragon hovering in the sky. Chapter 10:10. Why was it like this? This question could only be answered by those who knew the process of leaping through the dragon gate. It was not hard to find the answer from the increasingly excited expressions of the Li Guang couple. However, no one was paying attention to the two of them. Everyone's gaze was on the dragon in the sky. Boom! A purple thunderbolt suddenly burst forth from the purple halo in the sky and struck the glassy coiling dragon. The coiling dragon was instantly covered in purple lightning, and after a while, it gradually disappeared into the body of the coiling dragon. The lifelike but lifeless glassy coiled dragon suddenly trembled and the scales on its body slightly opened up. A majestic and ancient aura surged out. The huge dragon suddenly raised its head and opened its mouth that was filled with fangs. Roar! Its roar shook the heavens and earth. The surface of the river Styx trembled like a sieve, causing everyone's eardrums to feel slightly numb. After a long roar, the huge dragon's head slightly sat down. Its coiled body was like a spring and fiercely shot into the pitch-black night sky like an arrow released from a bow. A strong gust of wind instantly blew, causing Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the dragon transformation gate, to stagger. Xiao Yuan, on the other hand, tightly hugged onto his thigh. The huge dragon that was brimming with vitality was now completely golden, as if it had just escaped from a cage. It moved like a golden thunderbolt, shaking its head and wagging its tail as it swam freely in the pitch-black night sky. Its aura was astonishing and it was extremely awe-inspiring. The experts hiding in the night sky could no longer hide. Wherever the golden light passed, they all revealed themselves and dodged. Only now did the people below realize that there were so many people hiding in the sky. However, they did not mind as they did not do anything. It was not wrong for them to quietly watch the show from the sky. The flying dragon was in the wild, wandering in all directions. Even the place where the scholar and the silver armor army were hiding was no exception. Seeing the flying dragon charging over, the scholar waved his hand and directly pulled the huge head of the flying dragon to the side. The flying dragon's body wriggled past and had nothing to do with the two of them. The two of them were still hidden in the darkness and did not appear in everyone's sight. After swimming to its heart's content, the flying dragon swung its 4 limbs and charged toward the surface of the Netherworld River. With the Dragon Transformation Gate as the center, it quickly circled around the Dragon Transformation Gate. Its huge body was extremely nimble, and it could be said to be domineering. A huge whirlpool formed under the Dragon Transformation Gate, and one could almost see the bottom of the river Styx. Huge waves rose from the surface of the river Styx and surged in all directions, shocking the people standing on the water and causing them to fly into the sky. The raging waves that surged in all directions reverberated, and once again caused huge waves to surge furiously at the Dragon Transformation Gate. The flying dragon that was circling around the Dragon Transformation Gate quickly passed through the huge waves, directly passing through the empty mountain belly of the Dragon Transformation Gate. Its speed was extremely fast, breaking through the waves and winding around the Dragon Transformation Gate. In the end, it quietly hovered above the Dragon Transformation Gate, slightly nodding as it stared at the two people standing on the mountain peak. It could be said that he was as agile as a rabbit and as quiet as a virgin. The surging movements in all directions began to gradually calm down. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that something was wrong. Before he could even take 2 steps, one of his thighs felt heavy, and he immediately said to Xiao Yuan, who was pulling him back, "Xiao Yuan, quickly let go. I have already helped you. There is nothing else I can help you with now." "Xiao Yuan, quickly let go, I am going down." "No. I am scared." Xiao Yuan looked at the ferocious huge dragon in the sky in fear, and did his best to hold back Yu Qianqiu. "Damn. Quickly let go, are you trying to get me killed?" Yu Qianqiu almost wanted to beat him up, but the two of them had more or less developed some feelings for each other. He immediately roared at the Li Guang couple below, "Old Li Guang, quickly control your son, I have already done you a great favor, you can't be like this, quickly ask your son to let go." "Brother Yu. I am scared alone." Xiao Yuan immediately wailed. "Damn. You were the one who pestered me to send you up, now that you are here you say you are scared, what have you been doing?" Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to push his forehead twice, and seeing that the huge dragon in the sky was already moving, he immediately panicked and said, "Quickly let go, it is better for you to be scared alone than both of us." "Brother Yu. I am scared." Xiao Yuan cried and did not let go, and finally seemed to have thought of something. He raised his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu with tears. "Brother Yu. I will not transform into a dragon, bring me down with you. If you want to go down yourself. I am not stopping you, don't hug me." Yu Qianqiu pushed Xiao Yuan's head and said. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yuan hugged him even tighter, and said, "My whole body is weak, I can't move." Bullsh *T. You are hugging me with so much strength. Quickly let go. Yu Qianqiu was a little anxious. "Xiao Yuan, what nonsense are you saying?" Below, Li Guang was angry and shouted, "Quickly let go of your brother Yu." Zhangyan Xian, who had been watching the commotion for a long time, shook his head and sighed. This scum seemed to cause trouble wherever he went, and now he had come to the netherworld to cause such a big commotion. After today, there would probably be no one in the netherworld who did not know of Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at Li Guang, then looked at Xiao Yuan, who was hugging his leg. He did not care what Li Guang was thinking, and immediately glared at Xiao Yuan. "You said you wanted to go down, don't blame me in the future." Not caring whether Xiao Yuan agreed or not, he turned around and hugged Xiao Yuan. But before he could get up, he immediately heard a gust of wind. By the time he got up with Xiao Yuan in his arms, they were already surrounded by a golden haze. The flying dragon was circling around the mountain, its long body already wrapped around the two of them. Everyone stared at this scene in shock, feeling that this Yu Qianqiu was going to be dragged down by the fourth prince of the Li Palace. Suddenly, the circling flying dragon shrank, wrapping around the two of them like a ball of light. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's scream came from inside, "Little Yuan, don't hug me, let go." "Fuck, ah." As soon as Yu Qianqiu cried out, a figure was pulled out of the thick ball of light. If it was not Yu Qianqiu, who else could it be? They saw that he had landed in the empty carriage pulled by the Pegasus, a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He was lying weakly on the seat, his eyes closed, and it was impossible to tell whether he was dead or alive. Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know what had happened inside. However, they could imagine that with Xiao Yuan's cultivation, it was impossible for him to do this to Yu Qianqiu. It was most likely the doing of the ball of light formed by the flying dragon. But no one dared to go to the top of the mountain to check if Yu Qianqiu was dead or alive. Many people wanted to use their spiritual sense to check, but they all realized that it was impossible for their spiritual sense to approach the dragon transformation gate. There was a thick qi on the dragon transformation gate that prevented any spiritual sense or perception from peeking inside. Li Guang was also one of the people who wanted to investigate, but when he realized that his spiritual sense and perception could not approach, he clapped his hands in regret and sighed, "My Nether River Black Carp clan owes him." The Empress next to him only glanced at Yu Qianqiu a few more times before staring at the shrinking ball of light. As a mother, she naturally placed her son first. Everything else was secondary. Zhang Yunxin, who witnessed all of this, furrowed his brows. He also released his spiritual sense and perception to check, but to no avail. However, at this moment, he really hoped that Yu Qianqiu would die. This was because no matter how unreasonable an immortal emperor was, they could not blame him for such a strange way of dying. This was a good way to die. There was no better way to die than this. Most people's attention was quickly gathered on the shrinking ball of light. To them, a mere Yu Qianqiu's death had nothing to do with them. But when the ball of light gradually shrank into a humanoid shape similar to Xiao Yuan's size, it suddenly exploded with a blinding light. After the blinding light quickly disappeared, a small black dragon that was over 10 meters long floated above the dragon transformation gate with its claws and fangs bared. Roar. It let out a long roar into the endless night sky. The sound was not soft, but it was somewhat desolate and lonely. The water tribe of the Li Palace, with the exception of Li Guang, and the crown prince and princess, all knelt in the direction of the dragon transformation gate, their emotions extremely agitated. Nay! Nay! The two transparent steeds pulling the carriage both reared up and neighed as if summoning something. The little black dragon in the air flashed with black light and immediately transformed back into Xiao Yuan's original appearance. It slowly descended to the summit and looked down at the people below as it wept, "Father, mother, big brother, big sister, I have to go." At this moment, his mind had already fused with things that originally did not belong to him. He already knew what he was going to do next. Xiao Yuan. The Empress and her brothers and sisters couldn't help but call out. His mother was especially agitated, and Li Guang tightly hugged her with his lips tightly shut. Xiao Yuan wiped his tears. The two Pegasi had already pulled the carriage to him. He turned and climbed onto the carriage, then straightened up the reclining Yu Qianqiu and sobbed, "Big brother Yu, I'm afraid to go alone. I'll take you with me." At these words, everyone below almost fainted. They all stared up in shock. He was going to take Yu Qianqiu with him? Zhang Yunxian's eyebrows once more fiercely twitched. This couldn't be any better. It was unknown whether Yu Qianqiu was dead or alive. If he left in such a bizarre manner, the Immortal Palace would have even less reason to blame him. The two Pegasi did not express any objections, as if it was only right that they take Yu Qianqiu with them. They neighed in unison, stomped their hooves, and then flew into the air. They pulled the carriage around the dragon transformation gate and then flew directly toward the spinning violet halo in the sky. He took two of them with him at once. Just as everyone was dumbfounded, the sound of Yu Qianqiu waking up came from the sky. Damn it. It hurts so much. Why am I sitting here? Pegasi? Xiao Yuan, what's the meaning of this? Everyone saw Yu Qianqiu poking his head out from the back of the carriage, looking down with a terrified expression. Then, they saw half of Xiao Yuan's body poking out, clearly standing on the seat. They saw him hugging Yu Qianqiu's neck and sobbing. Xiao Yuan is afraid to go alone. Big Brother Yu, accompany Xiao Yuan. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.